Yes? Okay. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. My name is Rada Mihalcea. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Michigan, also director of the AI lab. And we are very glad to have you join us tonight for Friday Night AI. This is a series of events that we started, now it's 5 years ago, with the intention to engage more with you, with the local community. And we really see this as a two-way street. So we want to share more about all the work that we are doing. And we also want to hear from the community, again from you, the thoughts that you have around AI. And I believe this is particularly important today. There is a lot of hype around AI. There is also some truth to it. But really, I think media is full of AI. So we are very excited to have these conversations. And with all this tremendous progress that we've seen in AI, we've also seen specifically in natural language understanding, in image recognition, speech processing. But a lot of times what we see is the one-size-fits-all approach. So for instance, you probably tried ChatGPT or maybe DALL-E or some of the other tools out there. They are not necessarily personalized. And the hypothesis is that they will be equally useful for the roughly 20% of the population who live with a disability. But is that really the case? So we are glad to have you here for a conversation with AI and accessibility experts on the limitations and what are the potentials of AI-powered tools to assist people who are either blind or visually impaired, those who stutter, are deaf or hard of hearing, or those with dyslexia or aphasia. And also to talk about what are some of the opportunities that we have to turn these tools into personalized, adaptive technologies that can truly meet diverse accessibility needs. I'm joined today by professors and students who are thinking deeply about AI and its inner workings and the impact of these technologies on our society, and especially on accessibility and on disability support. So I have here An-Hong Guo, who's an assistant professor in computer science and engineering at the University of Michigan, also affiliated with the School of Information. He leads the Human AI Lab, working on to develop new assistive technologies for people with disabilities, with the goal of making the real world and the digital world more accessible. He is a Google Research Scholar, Forbes 30 Under 30 Scientist, SNAP Research Fellow, and Schwartz Innovation Fellow for Entrepreneurship. I also have here Shile Moraine, who is a professor in performing arts technology at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance at the University of Michigan, where she also holds an appointment in the School of Information. Her research focuses on human-computer interaction, especially interfaces incorporating haptic and auditory feedback. She earned her PhD from Stanford University's Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics, and she has also worked as a sound engineer and producer for BBC Network Radio. In 2019, she co-founded New Haptics with two colleagues from Michigan, and this company is developing a full-page Braille tactile display based on microfluidic techniques. And then we also have two students who help with the activities that you will get to engage with. Yara El-Tawil, who's a PhD student in the AI lab at the University of Michigan. She works on computational models for emotion recognition and mental health. And also Wenda Lee, who is an undergrad student in the AI lab at the University of Michigan. He works on large language models and healthcare. And I have also been working myself for the past 25 years in AI, so I can contribute to the conversation if need be. All right, so before we get started, just a few logistics. We will have, for the first 10 minutes, a couple of hands-on activities that Yara, Wenda, Shile, and An-Hong will lead you through, just so that you experience the effectiveness, or lack thereof, of how some of today's AI works as a tool to support accessibility. After that, we'll have several questions and answers with An-Hong and Shile around AI and accessibility, and we'll make sure to leave at the end some 10-15 minutes so you can ask your questions as well. So as suggested by our kind hosts, please keep a note of those questions so you can ask them once you get a microphone, so they can be accessible to those who listen online. All right, so with that, we can get started. Yara?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. So to kind of set the scene of how accessibility tools work today, I kind of wanted to lead us through a quick activity. So hopefully that, okay, perfect. So just a very basic, we see pictures all the time. We don't really think of how they appear to people who maybe use a screen reader or are not able to see them in the way that we do. So the task that I want to present you with is, how would you describe this image to someone who is blind? And we all use Microsoft PowerPoint, so I actually ran this through their alt text generator, and it says a group of people in the sky. So I'm sure we can all do better than that. So I would actually like to pose this question to you. So if you want to join the Slido, and then I will open the responses. And hopefully I would like to hear from you, how would you describe this image? And we'll maybe do like 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe we can wrap up in the next minute or so. Okay, it looks like most of the responses have come in. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to ask ChatGPT to choose the best response, and we're going to read it to Sheila and see what follow-up questions she has about the best response caption.
Because in the meantime, I want to ask, how many people here have heard about ChatGPT? How many people have used ChatGPT? How many of you have used ChatGPT that you can upload an image and get some answers? Okay.
Sorry, it looks like the internet is getting kind of slow.
I hope this is not going to be hard.
All right, so it shows 6 people skydiving together in a circle while holding hands with each other. They are in a place surrounded by sand, and shadows of their equipment are triangular and look like birds. The view is from a bird's eye view.
Wow. So it's saying that they're skydiving and they've got equipment around them, and what you can there are shadows in the image. Is that triangular shadows?
Yes.
I suppose what I would say is is this realistic? Do you think that this represents what's actually in the picture?
I think it represents it, but I think it's missing a lot of detail that we are maybe taking for granted. Do you have any follow-up questions about the image?
Yeah, so what would you say is missing?
I would say that we're missing, that it looks kind of like maybe it's noon, since the pyramids, the shadows of the pyramids are very long.
Oh, so
And-
you're saying there are pyramids in the image?
Yes. Oh, it didn't even say that there are pyramids. Yes, there are pyramids in the image. So this is in Giza in Egypt. It's also missing the fact that you can kind of start to see the city. So Cairo is kind of showing up around it. And, missing some of those little buildings around it and all the like shadows and maybe what color the skydivers are wearing.
Okay, so my understanding then is that it's people skydiving towards the pyramids or amongst the pyramids, and that you said it's around noon? Looks as if it's at around noon in terms of...
Yes, yeah,
Ah.
around noon.
No, that gives me a good idea. Thank you.
So I just wanted to kind of show you guys that like it's hard for even us to come up with these types of accessible ways for people to come up with image captioning and other captioning technologies, and even just like the AI that currently exists that does this is also pretty limited. So we saw a group of people in the sky, and this was like something that you can go generate right now. So I think that there's a long way to go, and I look forward to a really exciting discussion about it. Also, if I read your caption, please come see me after. I will give you a T-shirt.
So quick question, Yara. Do you have GPT-4o
Pulled up.
with you?
Yeah.
If you could send the picture in there and ask it to, without saying anything, and see
So let's see what it comes up
what
with.
it says.
Yeah. Bear with me as the Wi-Fi reconnects again. Maybe switch to my phone. Sorry about that. Okay. I actually wonder if ChatGPT is down. Oh, maybe we're back. All right, so we'll say, can you describe this image to someone who's visually impaired?
I'm thinking maybe you can start with just the general question,
Sure.
and then we can ask the follow-up question. If
Can you describe this image?
Yeah, maybe in 50 words or less.
Let me full screen that. All right, it says, this image shows a group of skydivers in a circular formation, free falling over the Great Pyramids of Giza. The vast desert landscape surrounds the pyramids with clear views and the ancient tomb structures below. The scene is dynamic, blending human activity with a historical landmark. Let's see.
Now if you add, for a person who's blind, see if it adds any detail. That was pretty good though.
All right, so it says, this image shows an aerial view of 6 skydivers forming a circle as they hold hands mid-air, high above the ancient pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Below them, 2 large pyramids stand in the sandy desert, casting long shadows. The ground is mostly barren with the ancient stone structures and pathways visible. The skydivers are wearing colorful suits, reds, greens, blues, and blacks, and are synchronized formation as they descend. The scene captures a striking contrast between human activity in the sky and the monumental history on the ground. Very poetic.
Oh, and that did capture your point about not describing the color of what they were wearing, didn't it, that second description?
Yeah, that's a lot of those little details that we take for granted.
That was good.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you. So we'll now move to a few questions to our panelists. And before I did introduce them briefly, but just to hear from them, my first question is if you can share a little bit more about how did you get interested in this space of intersection between AI and accessibility?
Yeah.
Sheila, do you want to start?
Sure. I think for me it was because I started to discover the power that AI has to, in models like this, to really be productive in describing images, and particularly in terms of things like charts and graphs and things, which has given me a much greater degree of independence in looking at images, say in research papers or even in images that I produce myself. And I think that was the first thing. And this has always been an issue for visually impaired people, particularly in being able to check your own work. So you can produce images in whatever software you use, like MATLAB or whatever, but then just checking that the image actually is displaying what you think it is. Always, you would normally have to go and have a sighted colleague check it for you. And I wouldn't say I would send it directly to a publisher, but at that point I'd still get somebody to check it. But for purposes of just sharing something with colleagues like Anhong, I might say, hey, here's some data, that I got from a study. What do you think? And I'd feel much more confident now because I can pre-check it with an AI before I sort of bring it to Anhong. You might say there's no line on that graph at all.
Yeah, so I'm Anhong Guo. I'm an assistant professor here. So actually, before I tell you about the story, I want you to pull up your phone. So how many of you have used a screen reader or tried it on your device? Yes. So screen readers are a very powerful way that blind and visually impaired people are using smartphones and applications today. So I want to lead a small activity for us to try it out, and actually it's quite fascinating. So if you can bring up your phone, I think the easiest way of turning it on is to activate Siri or, for example, the voice assistant and say, turn on voiceover. So let's see how this goes. Talkback, yes. Okay. If it is Android, it's called Talkback. That's the software's name. So now you may realize it's very hard for you to get out. Yeah, we will turn it off at the end. But can you raise your hand if you have VoiceOver activated? Okay, maybe a few more seconds for people to turn it on. Turn on VoiceOver.
Don't panic.
Okay, so now your phone still maybe look the same, but the way to interact with it is completely different. And this is how you can use it. So you can move your finger around on the screen to be able to navigate to different app icons. Is it working? Okay. Or you can swipe left or right to navigate the cursor. So for example, let's say you go to your Photos app, either using the direct Explore by touch or using the swipe gestures. So previously, you just tap on that app and you'll be able to open it. Now you will find that it doesn't work anymore. So instead, you can do a double tap. Right? So now the double tap gesture will map to opening the app. And there's a lot more. There are probably hundreds of other gesture commands. And actually, there's one thing that's pretty risky that I want you all to try. Use 3 fingers and do a triple tap. Did your screen turn off? So that's called screen curtain, right? And now you can't see what's going on, and maybe like if I ask you to try to exit the app or navigate to a photo, it might be pretty challenging. But actually, this is a side effect that because you can turn on the screen, turn on the screen curtain, it actually can save a lot of battery while you're using your device. So now you can do another triple tap with 3 fingers, and you can turn the screen back on. And then if you want, you can press the voice assistant and say, turn off VoiceOver. So that will get your phone back to how you typically use it.
And if you get stuck, we can help you.
Yeah, if you get stuck, ask for help. Someone else next to you
Just
can.
raise your hand. Or,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Anybody stuck?
All right. Yeah, so you've just used one of the most popular assistive technologies that's used every day by people who are blind or vision impaired. So that's called the screen reader. And actually, many of the assistive technology have inspired many other functionalities that's used by everyone. So I want to share my story about how I got interested in AI and accessibility. So when I started at Carnegie Mellon as a PhD student in 2014, I got to go to a blind person's house with Chiko Asakawa. So Chiko Asakawa at that point just joined Carnegie Mellon in the Robotics Institute as a visiting professor, and she developed one of the earliest web screen readers. So it is the one that runs on the browser, similar to the functionality that you see today. And I got to learn a lot more about their lives, about their work, and then I got very interested in this area and started developing tools and conduct studies in this area. So that's my story there.
Well, thank you. Thanks to both of you. I think it's, I'm always curious to hear how people got to be interested, and it seems like it's real life motivation in the first place, which determines us to put effort to find solutions. And speaking of solutions, we saw in the activity earlier some AI tools at work. Just very briefly, can you tell us a little bit more in lay terms how these models work?
I'm going to hand over to Anhong for that one.
I think so. The one that we looked at, ChatGPT. So there are a lot of things going on there. So for example, if you just ask a question and get a textual answer without the image, basically the way it works is there is a model that will take your text as input and then try to generate the next token one by one. So it uses a large corpus and be able to generate text that makes sense. So with the vision capability, it's transforming the image that you upload into a representation, and then with the text, so basically these models are able to take in different forms of information and then try to predict what is the thing that you should output to make the most sense. So that's what these models look like.
I think the other bit that's relevant is that they are trained on a lot of data. And of course, a lot of what they learn is influenced by the data they learn from. And so that's why we sometimes see biases or not necessarily effects that would be fit with everyone. And that takes me to my next question. I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of the tools that we see today are positioned as one size fits all. Presumably they will be good for everyone. And yet we see that they don't fit everyone. So my question to you is, what do you think about the role of personalization, especially with the view of making these AI tools more effective for users that have different disabilities?
I can take that, yeah. I think the power in these tools is being able to interrogate them in the way that you saw me ask about more questions about the image that we looked at the beginning. So rather in the same way as I might work with a sighted colleague to find out about an image, they might describe it and then I might ask a series of follow-up questions. AI is allowing me to do that, and that's how it becomes a sort of a personal investigation based on what I want at a given time. So, and you could have a picture of somebody at a beach and you might be interested in the landscape, or you might be interested in knowing if any of your family were in that picture, or you might be interested in knowing whether the tide was in or out and what time it seemed to be. So like anybody else, I come to an image with different goals at any given time, and being able to sort of interrogate the image in the way I want allows me to have a much more individual and sort of context-aware experience with the AI. And I think that's just one example of how they can be used to answer specific questions and meet specific needs at a given time. Is that kind of what you were thinking, Rada?
Yes,
Yeah.
like and in a way also going a little bit more, maybe, which is not what I asked, but going even deeper
Yeah.
on personalization, like, is there a role for making it, say, personalized to you? Like within a community, you might have a different way to interact with an image. Is that something that you would see?
Well, I mean, I think the AI in that it's responding to your questions is already kind of tailoring its answers to what you're asking it. And so one of the hopes that over time it's learning from your experiences, because your experiences of interacting with that image get put in the pot with everybody else's experience. And although they're a small part of the overall interactions with that image that the model might experience, they are part of the data now. And maybe the design is in being able to find those few interactions that represent interrogations by somebody who's visually impaired and kind of maybe give them some weighting or some kind of flagging so that when another visually impaired person comes along, the AI can sort of go into the corpus and say, this is what this person wanted to know the last time, so that will influence how I might answer your question.
Thank you. And Hong, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I think before powerful tools like ChatGPT with vision capability come out, there has been a lot of AI technologies out there, and they have been used for accessibility. So for example, Microsoft Seeing AI is an app that can read text, detect color, lighting condition, and describe the scene a little bit. Right, so those models will be able to, you can upload a picture or aim your camera and be able to say something out. But those tools are one size fits all. So people can choose to use them in certain situations. So they develop this kind of mental model of when and how to combine these different tools to make it most useful to them. And so people with disabilities are really early adopters of assistive technology. So people are willing to try these tools and figure out tricks and hacks of how to apply them. So they are really the domain experts in addressing their own accessibility needs and challenges. With the emergence of ChatGPT, these tools are becoming better at personalizing to users' individual requests. So it's able to respond to questions and personalize that way. But I think context is quite large, and there is still a lot of work to be done to better understand the user personal context. So I think that's one of the major challenges, to understand users' intent, and intent may change over time. And the second is AI tools have uncertainty, so it might be generate descriptions that have hallucination, and one big challenge is users are unable to verify the output of these models. So I think these are, in my opinion, two pretty big challenges. And related to personalization, some work that my group is working on is to create end-user programming methods that can empower people to create their custom assistive technology. Like, for example, how people can use the existing building blocks of AI capabilities, like recognizing text, detecting objects, understand color, and be able to create their own custom filters. Like, I want to find the number on the bus, and then they can reuse this. I want to find the expiration date on this bottle, and then they can use this very quickly to sort through mail or go through grocery items in their cabinet. Yeah.
And you mentioned some of the shortcomings, and I guess we already experienced some in the activity we've done here. And we also talk in general about some of the unintended biases that AI models have. So now, speaking specifically about people with disability, are there unintended biases in AI models that would disproportionately affect people with disability? And how can we go about addressing those?
Yeah, so there was a really nice paper that came out from some colleagues, one of whom's at Northeastern, looking at the way AI might be biased for at least people with visual impairments when you ask it a question. And they did a nice study with different queries and a bunch of different people, blind people asking questions of AI. And some of the things they came up with were really interesting. They found, for instance, that in some cases, when you said you were blind and you wanted a description of a picture, the AI would go, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry to hear that you're blind." And so the problem that it was having was it was hard for it to distinguish between a statement of fact and a statement of need or requirement. And that's kind of subtle. Like, "I am blind" could be a statement of fact, or "I am blind" could imply, "So could you please do X?" And I think that's a subtlety that we still don't see in the AI models, and perhaps one of the reasons why some of these unintended biases can creep in. And I'm sure there are many more, but that was just the one that came to mind.
And just to broaden it up a bit more, so AI models are trained using data that's out there. So you can imagine, for example, if voice assistant, voice recognition models are not, that does not have enough data from people who have atypical speech, or self-driving cars are not properly trained with people using wheelchairs, and many other cases. In fact, the data might be scarce, and so it's quite a big challenge. Then these models might inadvertently harm people. So we need to be really careful of deploying these technologies. And I think perhaps the best way of doing this is really bring in the stakeholders onto the table. So how do we involve people with disabilities as part of developing these models to be useful for everyone, rather than kind of as a post hoc solution to them.
Can I add one comment just quickly? I'm sure we've all remembered, you know, when you get your new iPhone and you take it out and the first thing it does is ask you to train the speech model if you're using Siri. Does everybody remember doing that? Gives you all these words to read and things. Well, at least the way these devices used to work, and the same is true for gesture, like the first couple of times you find it hard to use a new device, like say if you had an iPhone, you switch to Android, you're like, why isn't this thing? Because what happens with these models is they come out with some basic level of training that's useful for most of the people most of the time, and then they rely on you to refine the model in the phone initially, but now also using information from the cloud, so that it becomes a device that recognizes you as an individual all of the time. So it's that movement from recognizing most of the people most of the time to moving to recognizing one or two people all of the time is where the real power in these models comes. And that's why your devices you have to train them a bit, but in doing so they become hopefully more responsive to your needs and requirements.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, because we see a lot of the time that these models would not necessarily fit the users. And speaking more broadly about accessibility, I think people with an accent, like myself,
Yes.
I oftentimes not recognized by the tools that we have around the house. And I have to ask my children to translate for me and ask again, and that will work. And so I think training might help to some extent, but it's also to the point that Ahong you were making earlier, I think even working closely with people to develop technologies that eventually would be better at addressing these issues. And this is really a segue into my next questions. You mentioned collaboration with people with disabilities to make sure that the needs are met from the very beginning, from design all the way to implementation and deployment. So what are your thoughts on how to go about that? How could developers and researchers better collaborate with communities of people with disabilities?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we're getting better at doing this now. It used to be the case that most research for people with disabilities was done by people who didn't have disabilities, because they happened to be the people who had managed to get into these programs, eventually start up their labs and so on, because it's always challenging for a person with a disability to make it through college and still have the energy to actually fight to get into school, and not necessarily fight, but mostly sort of try to overcome the system which is not designed to necessarily fit their needs. So they're always working upstream, if you like. But when they do, like my colleague here, Venkatesh Potlery, we're both researchers who contribute or try and contribute to research on accessibility from our perspective, but we also bring to the table the ability to sort of catch things before they become too critical. So in our startup, for instance, I often go in and they'll show me something on our Braille display and I'll go, what is this? And they'll go, oh, well, we thought we could just do X or Y. And I'm like, that's not legible. And if I wasn't a Braille reader, the first time somebody might correct that could be at the next time we bring users into test, or the next time we turn up at a trade show. So being able to sort of catch these things and guide the research process from the bottom up can get you so much faster, so much further, so much faster, if a person with a disability that's relevant is right in the team with everybody as they're developing the product or the tool or whatever it is.
Yeah, so I'm a HCI researcher. HCI stands for Human-Computer Interaction. And for many of the projects, for all of the work we do, we follow a human-centered design process, and which means we really bring in the people who are the experts into the stage of understanding the needs, designing solutions, evaluating, developing the solutions, and really evaluating. And everything is iterative. So I think to really make tools that's effective and useful for people with disabilities, we need to involve people at all stages. So in a lot of our work, we have team members to contribute on every stage, and that's a method that we also call participatory design. Yeah, so I think to make AI useful for everyone, we also need to bring in people from different communities and into this AI development process.
And I really like the point you made earlier about people with disabilities being early adopters. And I think even now we see here like the group of people that we learn best from in terms of being engaged from the very beginning. I think that should generally be the truth for any AI, to have like the users engage in that. But I see a lot of the research in this participatory design primarily coming from this community, which I think it's really great. I mean, it's a lot to learn from.
Yeah, and I think there's also, from the disability scholarship perspective, there's a whole bunch of scholarship around the fact that people with disabilities are also infinitely good at hacking. As Anhong said, we're really good at hacking our own solutions, and often if you look at the way we've hacked things to make them work, it can become itself a seed for a design process. So that's also kind of another route.
Yeah, I love that point too. I think it's the creativity that comes from maybe not having access to something, which I think is so true. So my next question is a bit of a follow-up on what I asked before. What are some key ethical challenges in deploying AI for accessibility? And I particularly have in mind privacy, data use. What are some of the concerns there?
I think that's true. I think it's as true as it is of any use of AI in healthcare applications or anything like that. You are revealing who you are, and these algorithms, of course, are trying to model your behavior and your needs. And if you say, I'm visually impaired and I need a description this way, of course, now the model has an awareness of that. And the worry is that that could be used, it could be disclosed, not necessarily intentionally, in a situation where it might not be relevant, or it might be actually, inappropriate. But then also we all are aware of the background of all sorts of insurance companies who would quite like that information, thank you very much. And so, we're always worried, I suppose, about how much to reveal. And it's a trade-off. It's like anything else. You give away information for free. The reason we have access to all these tools is for free is because we're giving away information that the manufacturers are using to improve the tools. So it's a trade-off. And I think when you're in a vulnerable population, that trade-off may be, a different proposition. It could maybe make you even more vulnerable in many ways. So I think we don't understand the vulnerabilities, and it would be good, I think, to have a handle on what we're exposing as we do interact with these models.
I think one challenge I want to bring up is now is really a a golden age of AI and accessibility. So these models are coming out. They are very powerful. They are multimodal that can understand text, videos, audio. And many assistive technologies are incorporating them, such as Be My Eyes is a company that have sighted volunteers that can provide visual assistance for vision impaired people. And they have a tool called Be My AI that can do this using OpenAI's GPT models. Right? And many other companies are doing this. But we also need to be considering, what if one day OpenAI decide to cut off these access, cut off these models for these companies? Then there are a lot of communities who will be losing access that they might be increasingly relying on. So I think as a community, we should also be thinking about the continuation of deployed technologies. And this applies in so many different contexts. So I think there are, for example, my lab have deployed some iOS applications, for example, for accessing appliances. But there is a challenge for us to maintain that software if there are people who are already using them. So how do we, as a community, really maintain and make sure these software have longitudinal usage and support is a challenge.
Thank you. So I'm getting to my last question. So please do think of the questions that you would like to ask, and we'll pass on the mic so you can ask. So my last question is, looking into the future, what do you think is the most promising innovation on the horizon for AI and accessibility?
I think for me, it's really the increasing appearance of AI assistance in the tools I already use. We already talked about how badly PowerPoint did at describing the slide at the beginning. But if that was connected to a better model, PowerPoint could have had access to a much better description of that slide. And that, I think, to make better alt text automatically, because one of the things we always want to do as a university is to make sure that all of the materials that we produce are accessible to everyone. So it'd be really nice if videos were automatically signed and captioned. It would be really nice if slides were automatically alt texted and so on. And those kind of things that can make the lives of anybody who needs to make accessible technology easier, I think that's going to be one of the really exciting things, that this won't be a burden anymore. It'll just be like another button to press on Canvas or whatever. So that's exciting, that the things that are kind of blocking implementation because of cost and lack of people time may become more possible because they can be offloaded to AI. But I'm also excited about the work that my colleagues like Venkatesh and other colleagues are doing themselves to sort of bridge gaps that are maybe really only niche gaps for anybody else, that they wouldn't really, get much attention if it wasn't for the fact that we see a need in our own community of visually impaired scientists and researchers to solve problems that are kind of roadblocks for us, and that could really open up the possibility to work much more independently and much more fluently, but they're not going to be exciting for labs like Anhong's because the community of users is so small. But we ourselves, amongst ourselves, are really making a huge amount of progress very quickly to make our own lives easier. And I think that's a really exciting moment to be at, where you can really do something to change the lives of the people who are in a similar situation to you, who may not be able to get attention otherwise. So that's the other thing I'm excited about.
Uncle?
Yeah, so I think some of the technologies that's on the horizon that I think will have tremendous potential. One is beyond what we already have, this kind of conversation turn-by-turn based interaction with AI technologies, is live AI technologies, such as real-time video and speech descriptions. I think that's going to be really powerful. And that plus, I think many companies are starting to release smart glasses that has augmented reality capabilities. That's really a great form factor for always-on kind of assistance that can support the everyday tasks while people are exploring the real world, when they are cooking, when they are walking around, when they are manipulating many physical objects. So I think I'm very excited about many of the tools and hardware and technologies that's coming out.
And just to put a timeline on that, I don't know, Sheila, what do you think? Like what you were imagining, is that like a couple of years, more?
I think, well, maybe Venkatesh is also a good person to ask here too. Have you tried the meta glasses yet, Venkatesh? Any good?
Yes, they are very promising, but also I think, there, as you said, right, there are gaps where it's, for example, trying to summarize text. Oh, sorry. I'll repeat myself. Yes, I think they're great, but there's also a lot of room for improvement. And as you know, Anhang and Sheila, you were talking, right? There are nuances that get missed out. Say, if you give it a document, it's trying to summarize it, whereas you want it to be read verbatim, right? There are these small personalization things that are missing. And there is, of course, the social acceptability aspect. So yeah, it's moving at a very fast pace.
Right, so we can take questions from the audience.
So just to remind everybody, we appreciate having all of you here. We will pass the mic around to you. So if you raise your hand, we want this because we are recording this and then putting up on a live stream. So for future broadcasting purposes, please raise your hand. We'll pass the mic on to you. And again, this may be a little bit clumsy, but we'll do the best that we can. Sir?
Thank you for a tremendous presentation. When you speak about AI, you speak about it in disabilities of hearing and sight. But clearly, there are other disabilities like dementia for some people. Are there any developments occurring in that domain where someone who loses their memory might be supported in getting home if they got lost, for example?
Does any of you like?
I don't, but do you?
So primarily, my lab have been focusing on visual and also recently motor disabilities. But I know there are a lot of work out there. There's a bigger community, and in fact, later in October, there's a conference called Assets, which is computers and accessibility. It has a lot of kind of cutting-edge research in many different communities, including cognitive impairment and dementia, et cetera. Yeah.
And I would add just briefly that it wasn't necessarily for disability, but in my lab we worked a few years ago on what we call iLexa, like an Alexa with eyes, as a way of recording things that are happening that you can interact with and track back. Like, I guess the stereotypical example, where are my keys? But similarly, you could use them to track back, maybe like to go back and ask questions from what happened before in your life. I saw first a hand over there. And then we can.
Oh, all right. So let's say if I'm trying to build an AI to provide like disability support, like how should I approach that? Like, should it be like a top-down, where like I have like a specific goal and kind of narrow it down to like what kind of like functions I need, or should I do like a bottom-up where I like gather like similar functions and kind of like narrow it down to like one specific goal?
I think the first thing to do is to figure out who your target community would be, and then go ask them, because they'll tell you pretty quickly what it is that they think your approach could solve, and that's often a much better way to shape your design process. Go do some what we call requirements capture. Maybe if they're interested, have them work with you on the design. And then you're going to get to the goal much more quickly, and it'll be much more effective at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
Hello. I'm curious if you've ever looked at, like, sort of, like, AIs that are, like, very, like, narrowly focused to one specific task in helping folks with disabilities. So I'm actually totally blind. I'll give an example of one that I use, is one called OKO, which is the AI co-pilot for the blind. And this has changed my life because as blind folks, you can work with someone that's like an orientation and mobility instructor, and you learn how to listen to sounds, you know, of traffic to know when to cross roads. But with this app, I've been able to work at intersections that I never had orientation mobility training at, like diverging diamond highway interchanges. And now I've gotten to the point where I've developed the confidence to, I mean, even cross over these types of intersections where there might not even be, walk signs or pedestrian pathways. So I think these hyper-focused, on-device AIs that do a certain task can be really helpful. Like this, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but with this app, OKO, that might have jumped ahead. But basically what this app, OKO, does is it tells you when walk signs are on and off. So you can point it at the walk sign across the street, and it will tell you walk or don't walk. So you can, as a blind person, see the walk sign is on, and then you can say, oh, so this is the traffic pattern I need to now know to listen for to know that the walk sign is at this type of intersection. And then in the future, you can apply that to other types of intersections. So you can essentially grow your ability to travel as a blind person without the training maybe from an orientation mobility person. I just think that this is like really innovative to be able to grow skills yourself. And I think that these on-device hyper-focused AIs can be really great.
That's a really good point. Thank you for making it. Yeah. That I think, you've done a couple of those, haven't you? I know, very focused.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about some of the ones you did?
Yeah.
Like the appliance stuff, for instance?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two approaches that are going in parallel right now, and people are figuring out how they will merge in the end. So one approach is this hyper-focused, specialized applications, that this app that does understanding traffic signals really well. This app that describe images really well. This app, for example, can help you capture a document, and you can, show you the outline for you to explore it really well, right? So that's kind of before ChatGPT or these kind of more general AI technologies came out. That has been the model. But I think there is also a lot of potential with the more general purpose applications, such as GPT-4o. You might be able to ask it anything. But then as the new form factors are evolving, for example, previously people use apps on the phone. You have an app for everything. Now, increasingly, maybe you're going to have a wearable device that is maybe always on. Then how will the app model be transformed? Maybe like you can ask for something, and there is the app will provide the foundational capability, but you're not actively switching between apps. So I think many of these companies are figuring it out in the commercial space. So for example, folks from Seeing AI, from IRA, I think that it's an exciting space, and I'm looking forward to how the industry will evolve and also contributing to that.
Hi. So I've noticed a lot in recent years that there's been more and more importance placed on providing accessibility and disability support in gaming, especially. What are some ways that AI is sort of providing more support in that space?
I actually don't know, because I'm not really a gamer anymore. I used to do a lot of audio-only games, but it would be interesting. I think in VR in particular, it's going to become really useful to have AI help you in these sort of virtual environments, because at the moment they're really not accessible. Venkatesh, have you played any AI enhanced games? No?
Yeah,
Sorry.
just.
It's been a while since I played games as well, but I think there's a lot of early stage work going on, right, in thinking about how to use AI to make games more accessible, providing captions or providing speech, right, and so many other ways in which, how does the game, mechanism of playing the game even become more accessible and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But one
Yeah.
could imagine a kind of co-pilot almost assistant in a game, which would be kind of helpful.
Yeah, I know colleagues, for example, Brian Smith, who is a professor in Columbia University, has been developing accessible interaction techniques in kind of games for blind people. So that's a space to look out for. And I think many of the techniques that we see here of describing the scene, answering questions about different objects can apply. But there are additional challenges, like, for example, what about the context? What about the kind of game characters that people have already encountered versus something new, like how to embed memory in there, how to adapt the experience based on context. These are all interesting opportunities there. Yeah. Yeah. But I think many of these different medias, different kinds of like games, videos, 360 videos, virtual reality environments, and even the real world, they share some similarities. So I think as researchers, we are developing techniques that could potentially be generalized to many of these different use cases.
Yeah, especially with augmented reality.
Absolutely.
So we'll take a final question over there.
I just, perhaps more of a statement. So I really enjoyed that question about other disabilities, for example, dementia. So I was a data scientist working in the healthcare sector, and now I'm a new nurse. So what I'm about to bring up is a little bit more rules-based, but I've been in a hospital where when the nurse walks into the room or a provider walks into the room, it announces who the person is, what their role in the care team is, it silences the television and whatnot. And I think that this could be a huge opportunity, for example, in reorienting patients that are experiencing delirium. And kind of the broader concept of my question, or maybe it's a topic for discussion, is how do we take these things that we're researching in academia or in grassroots areas and go to corporate partners that are deploying these sorts of technologies that are solving very specific issues and sort of expand their solutions. You know, it could be more dynamic. It could monitor the patient. It could open the shades, turn the TV on when the patient is experiencing delirium, reminding them to put their glasses on, engaging them in storytelling or any of those sorts of interventions. Because honestly, having a human sitter for these patients is not a great use of resources.
Okay. I guess there is agreement on that statement. And with the permission of our hosts, we can take a couple more questions if people have more.
Just one response to that. I think as educators, our role is to inform more students and people about the potential and risks of deploying these technologies and the methods of doing so in the right way. And then if more of you go into this industry and work on these problems, then I think that's collectively going to influence, make the world a better place for the cases that you described.
Yeah, this was a great presentation, guys. Thank you. So I work for a company called DQ, and what we do is actually build software and provide services to other companies to make their products, software products, accessible to people with disabilities. And one thing that really stuck out to me and stuck with me was your discussion about if we design these tools to be accessible by default, it could really change the experiences of the end users. And one of the aspects of that I always find interesting is how can we make accessibility accessible to people who don't go through these experiences, right? If I'm a developer building software and I've never encountered these situations myself, I don't have the formal training, I don't know how to make my code accessible, how it gets translated on www. To be accessible. So there are tools now, both using AI and just using automation to help those people identify those accessibility defects in their software. So I was very curious to know, what has your exposure to that been? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's going to take a lot of people working together. So I think on the one hand, raising awareness. So people are for example, adding alt text to images when they are putting together web pages. Many things like that. But also, I think with AI, there is a possibility and a potential to have for example, the individual application developers surface the content into a potentially unified layer, and then you can have accessibility experts develop the best mapping of how to present that information in different contexts to different people with different abilities, so that so that each individual, for example, each individual application designer doesn't have to kind of test, and they don't have the resource to test and make sure their software is accessible for people with a wide range of abilities, right? So I think with AI and the software development workflow is also going to change, and yeah.
Thanks a lot for the great presentation. I learned a lot, and I have a question. So for the visually impaired people, I think like for current AI, like they have to generate token by token. So like there's a wait time for that, and how does that affect the how does that affect the interaction between the visually impaired people with the AI system? And also, I think like even before the hallucination of the AI happens, there's a possibility like when we use ChatGPT, it might break down at a certain point. And how? Because I mean, like you mentioned that visually impaired people has a lot of hacks to hack this sort of things around. I wonder like what is your way of handling this kind of situation? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think in your question is another very important point, which is that to use GPT-4, you actually 4.0, which is what we were using today, you actually have to pay for it. And classically, people with visual impairments and people with disabilities in general have been less likely to be employed and tend to be at the lower end of the earning spectrum. So at the moment, these systems, which make our lives a lot easier, are not really available because you have to pay for basically tokens to use them. So I think, again, to Anhong's point, the sustainability of these solutions is going to be important. But also, to answer your second point, I think it's hard. It's so hard to anticipate all of the use cases at the moment, and I think it's going to take a lot of different people being exposed and making us aware of their needs in order for us to sort of say, as you say, like hack or find ways to hack solutions that eventually become design principles or whatever that will guide this. It's not a very good answer, I know, but I think, as Anhong says, it's such an open space right now, which is fantastic because the locks haven't yet been put in place, and we can still play. But at the end of the day, it's also this is going to not be the way it is forever. And I think, being able to hack and find our own solutions may not be something we'll be able to do for long. So, yeah. I don't know if that
Right. Well, and with that, many thanks to our wonderful panelists, Shile and Anhong, also to our students who helped with the activity, Yara here and Wenda over there, also to Christina, who you met at the entrance, who helped orchestrating all this event, and of course our host, Ann Arbor District Library. And thanks to you for being an engaged audience.
Yeah, thanks again for coming. On behalf of our panelists, we appreciate that. And just as a quick reminder, if you are not already on the Michigan AI Lab email list for this, there are QR codes that are scattered about. The library will be closing in 20 minutes or so, so you will hear an announcement briefly asking you to head for the exits. But thanks again for coming on behalf of your Ann Arbor District Library.
Sorry.